You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 73. This podcast is dedicated to Circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for everyone else to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey, friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. The Artist Athlete started in 2018. Oh my God. And at the very beginning, I knew that I always wanted the podcast to be community oriented. That meant people in the industry were my guests. I am part of the circus industry as a performer, as a creator, and I wanted the people who funded this podcast to be a part of the community as well. And Patreon gives you the opportunity to do that. So if you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. You can give as little as $1 a month, and every dollar goes to paying me and my team of people who bring you this amazing content every single week. More recently, I've started to do every Tuesday, the Patreons and I get together and we do a crowdcast where we watch different YouTube videos and comment on them and talk about our favorites, talk about what we like, talk about what we don't like. It's a really great way to kind of enjoy some circus, come together and learn more about what's going on in the industry, who's out there, and feel connected during this crazy time. Again, patreon.com/theartistathlete. My guest today is Crista Marie Jackson. Crista Marie is an accomplished aerialist, actress, stunt woman, and model. She's known for her character development and technical skill. Her work has been featured in major motion pictures, including as the stunt person for Zendaya in The Greatest Showman, off-Broadway houses, national and international tours, corporate venues, and theme parks. She has stunt doubled Beyonce. She's performed and worked at the Metropolitan Opera House, New York Theater Workshops, The Pearl, Berlin Redgrave, NYC Summer Stage, Blue Horizons Dolphin Show, Cirque de la Mer, and Radio City Music Hall. And did I mention she worked with Beyonce? Most recently, Crista has been working as the Associate Artistic Director for the show Alegria from Cirque du Soleil. Here's my interview with Crista Marie Jackson. Crista Marie Jackson, welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yay. So I want to start by kind of letting you introduce yourself, talk about who you are and what you do in the circus world.
My name is Crista Marie Jackson. I am an aerialist, actor, stunt woman, dancer, and currently the Assistant Artistic Director of Alegria by Cirque du Soleil. I come to the circus world from a really sort of diverse background. I started as a dancer, did that for most of my childhood, and then found acting because I love to talk. And after I graduated from college, I was working as an actor in New York for a while, and I just needed something more, something that's fun, because it was a lot of acting work, which was fun, but it's sort of a different energy focus, I guess. So I started taking some circus classes as a hobby, and I loved it. So I revamped my whole life. One job, got another, went from waiting tables at one restaurant to I found a fine dining place to go. So I would train from 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. And then I would work from 5:45 until 11 or 1 or whenever we were done with the shift. And I do that 5 days a week. And I was exhausted, but so happy. And
oh, wow.
Maybe
nice.
6 months or so, 6 to 8 months after that, I got my first job at a show in San Diego. So I sort of found it after doing a lot of things that were really useful for circus performers without actually doing circus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I actually started as an actor in New York too. So that's really cool to hear.
But I was going to ask you when you graduated from high school or like when you got to the city, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of us, I feel like the world is really small. Like as big as the acting world is and as like expansive as it is, I found that like the more I work, the more I know people who know people who know people. And it's just this like super tiny community that's also huge at the same time.
Hey, friends, fans, and enemies. This is editing Shannon from the future. I just wanted to let you guys know that it was at this point during the interview that Krista and I realized that her best friend was a girl that I went to high school with. So we had a moment about that, which I've cut out because the girl who I went to high school with / Krista's best friend, I didn't really reach out to her to ask her if I could use her name or not. And so to protect her privacy, I'm not going to, but she's awesome. And if you're listening, hi. Okay. So did you start at Circus Warehouse?
Yeah, I started at Circus Warehouse in Long Island City. So
okay. With Susie Winston and
Yep, Circus Mama. Hey, Susie. I started there, I think in 2010, or I took a class there prior to the professional training program starting. But as the pro program started, I was one of the first students to go through it. So I started that process in September, I think, of 2010. I went to my first Circus audition in January of 2011. Because like coming from an acting background, I feel like half of the skill of getting a job is the audition, not the job itself. I mean, the job itself is a part of it, but getting good at the auditioning is how you're going to get work. So I figured I'm 6 months in, I'm getting enough skill where I feel comfortable showing people. So let me start getting used to auditioning so that I know what that feels like by the time I'm actually ready to start working. But I got the very first job I auditioned for. I know. It was one of those like, okay, I guess I'm really doing this. It was a beautiful validation for having made the choice I made and the work that I'd put in, you know. And
yeah, for sure.
That, I guess, April, May, I moved to California and started working at SeaWorld in San Diego in their Cirque du
Very cool.
It was awesome. Like, and from there, everything just kind of rolled one thing into another, into another, into another. I've been really lucky. You know, I'm hardworking. I know that that's a part of it, but I've also had a lot of really beautiful coincidental things happen in my career. So I've been put in a lot of really great places to be able to meet really great people that have then put me in a position to continue to grow as an artist and to allow my career to sort of blossom.
And I think that that's such an interesting comment that you make about how much luck does play into these things. Like, obviously you have to be skilled. Obviously you have to be hardworking, but luck is a component of this whole industry.
Definitely. And I think it's I think it's partially a mentality thing. And I think it's partially circumstance. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got is you have to get ready to get lucky.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I've had like beautiful opportunities presented to me and I wasn't ready either mentally or physically. And I didn't get those opportunities because I was not ready to get lucky. And you better believe that I learned from that. I will never be unprepared for luck again. So as a result, like the turnaround of it is luck is laboring under the correct knowledge. So if you work hard in a positive way towards the thing that you care about, the opportunities will present themselves and you will be ready for them when they do present themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Because my follow-up question would be like, how do you get ready to get lucky? Like, what are the things you do or what does that look like? You know?
I think it depends on the job. I think it depends on what I'm looking to get out of an experience. So like I said, there's a lot of circumstance around the jobs that I've gotten. So I was working at SeaWorld in San Diego for a while. From my job at SeaWorld in San Diego, I got my first feature film job and I got my SAG card. On that project, I met one of my really good friends, Sarah Malasky, and our friendship, aside from being like an amazing part of my life, she connected me with a whole bunch of people that I've run into later in my life. So let's say we did Ender's Game. Oh man, I'm trying to like put the pieces together.
And what did you do? Were you a stunt person on the film?
Yeah, or? I stunt doubled the little boy because, you know, aerialists.
Totally.
Tiny and have air awareness. Yeah, I was in a harness doing a lot of zero gravity. The general idea for the stunt itself was we were in a zero G room, and having air awareness and being able to manipulate yourself in a harness is a really useful thing to have in the film world. And all of my experience as an aerialist, although I didn't have a lot of harness experience at that time, I was prepared. I was ready to get lucky. I was ready for that job to show up so that I could do the work to be ready by the time I got on set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very cool. Did you audition for it, or did someone throw your name out? How did you get that job?
A combination. Someone did throw my name out for it. And with a lot of stunt work, you submit your stuff to the stunt coordinator. They ask for a current picture, your measurements, and your local status and your union status. So I'd never worked on a SAG project before. And as an actor, I was like, oh my God, it's a SAG film. It's a feature film.
And SAG, for those of you who don't know out there, is the Screen Actors Guild, which is the union that actors who are on film are in.
Yeah. It totally makes sense. And it's a great organization. I'm super honored to be a part of it. And so I submitted my stuff, or my boss at SeaWorld knew someone who was working on that project, looking for someone that fit my profile. So my boss at SeaWorld gave them my information, and they flew me out to Louisiana for the first contract was 4 days. And they threw me in a harness and said, look like you're floating. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, you're 0 G, look like you're floating. And at that point, I'd never been in a harness before. I had no clue, or I'd been in like climbing harnesses, but not an acrobatic harness. And it was terrifying, but I got the job. And I worked on the film for 5 weeks, got my SAG card from it. Having that on my resume was super useful for everything else that came after. And that was the first time I really spent a lot of time in a harness. So it was like I needed that experience to get the other jobs I got in my future. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So like I worked at the Metropolitan Opera House, and what they needed me to do at the Met was pretend like I was swimming from the top of the stage, like diving for pearls. I was working in Pêcheur de Pearl, which, pardon my horrible French accent, but it's Bizet's opera called The Pearl Fishers, where we started during the prelude, swam to the bottom of the stage, swam back up, swam down, and swam back up. And my experience in the harness from Ender's Game set me up so that when I walked into that audition, I was ready to go.
Oh, how fun. Can you talk about what harness work is a little bit?
So harness work is what they essentially do. If you've ever been rock climbing before, you've probably been inside of a harness. There's 2 points on either side of your hips and then cuffs around your legs. That's sort of like a basic acrobatic harness setup. Now in the stunt world, they can add clips and pieces and rigging points from various parts of that harness. It sort of depends on what harness you're using and what gag you're trying to do. But generally, harness work is about using air awareness to tell another story. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah, and it's not a lot of like it's not.
Oh God, no! It's like it's not aerial work in the way like when I first started doing harness work, I was like, this isn't aerial. Mostly because well, it's easy for people who are used to doing a lot of pull-ups because it really not easy. I don't mean to diminish the skill set, but if you're used to doing a lot of pull-ups and having a lot of dominant upper body strength and a really solid core, then it's something that totally fits in your movement lexicon. And in a lot of ways, it feels easier because you're not responsible for manipulating your own body weight. You have to control your body weight, but you don't have to actually put yourself anywhere.
Would you recommend harness work to aerialists?
Absolutely. I would recommend. Yeah. Like, especially people who are looking to diversify. Like, I think one of the best things I did was join SAG because working in film is really fun. It's financially rewarding. It's something that you can, like, just speaking of, I did a lot of gig work when I was in the city. So you'd have a gig here, a gig there. I would work on an off-Broadway show, and that off-Broadway show would pay you next to nothing, but you were grateful to be off-Broadway, so you were working that job. But the film I worked on 2 years prior was still paying me. So it made it possible for me to be able to do different types of work and to be able to be creatively flexible because I had what we call residual income from those movies coming in. Whenever you work on a feature film project or something that is filmed through SAG-AFTRA as a union, what they've negotiated into their contracts additional compensation for featured performers that are a part of that movie and film. So when I worked on Ender's Game, I got my original paycheck, but I also got residuals from that. So while I was working on my first off-Broadway musical that was paying me nothing, I could make that project work because I had Ender's Game sort of supplementing my income at that time.
That's so cool.
I feel like half the time I play like financial puzzling, like that's like the gig life. Like, how do you make this work? So I can do this job, I can do that job. I can, well, maybe I should pass on this one because it's not going to be as useful as that one. It's, a whole game.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting puzzle too, because there are, like you're saying, like intangibles, like your friend that you met, Sarah, who like, how could you have known that that would have been as beneficial as it was, or that you're still meeting people through her?
But it gets weirder. Like I met Sarah working on Ender's Game. And when I was visiting Sarah in Los Angeles, she got a text message from one of her friends who was looking for somebody to stunt double Beyonce on a music video. We sent my info in. I got that job as a stunt performer, not as a circus performer, but because I was in SAG and I had stunt credits and I looked like her and could do the basic sort of like take a hit, fall kind of movement, I got the job. Working with Beyonce the first time set me up so that when I was put up to potentially be a part of the Formation World Tour, I made it to the final round of that whole consideration and then was a part of the creation process for what the aerial in that show ended up being. And the choreographer from that show was also best friends with Sarah. And it's crazy. And while I was working on Formation, I met Marshall. Marshall Nelson is the head coach of Alegria by Cirque du Soleil. And the whole reason I have the job that I have right now, because I didn't really know it existed before a year and a half ago, or I guess 2.5 years ago now, was because Marshall sent me a text message in July of 2018 going, "Hey, are you thinking about career transitioning? We're looking for an AA for a project, and I think it's something that you'd be great at." And all of that happened because I decided to go on an audition in 6 months after I started circus training. I thought, I need to prepare myself for what comes next. And it was that part of me that wanted to prepare for what came next that brought all of that to me.
That's so cool.
So like, it's this super puzzle, and it's one of those things where I find myself on a regular basis so grateful that I've encountered the people that I've encountered and I've been able to leave the impression on them that I have. Because I really think that in terms of all of the skills that I have, the way that I work with people is maybe not the most important thing, but it's really high up there in terms of the skills I think that continue to sort of put me in a good position to get work.
I love that you bring that up. And I want to ask a little bit about that because, like even right off the bat, starting to talk to you, I was like, oh my God, I've known this girl forever. She's my best friend. You have this very like warm, inviting personality. When you're on set or when you're on a job, is this something that you've consciously cultivated over the years? Is this like how you came out your mama? Like how did you, how conscious of this skill set are you?
Not really, to be quite honest, but I will say that it's something that I did have to learn and develop. I was not a particularly popular kid. I was hanging out alone with my toys or in all of my dance classes doing, I was a little bit of a loner growing up. And I think because I know what it feels like to be lonely, I never want to put someone in a position where they feel lonely or uncomfortable in a space with me. And I think that experience has sort of trained me to be able to listen to a lot of nonverbal cues and to be very conscious of how people are feeling, not just what they're saying. Because I think very often, because human beings are complex animals, those things don't always line up. So I think the more dropped in I am, the more I can continue to be sort of the empathetic support that I think a lot of people want and need, because this business is crazy.
Sure. And it also, I feel like, makes you very good at anticipating needs.
Yeah.
So someone doesn't have to tell you, go stand over there. You're already like looking at where they're looking and almost like a step ahead in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Totally. And I think that's absolutely right. I think making a good impression on people, I think it sort of depends on what environment that you're in and what type of impression you want to leave and what type of impression, like what the most useful impression will be. And I don't mean that in like a manipulative, this is what I want to say sort of way. But I think if I'm going into a film set, for example, I'm going to wait and take my cues for how I'm going to act from the stunt coordinator first, not anybody else, because that's the person who, as a stunt performer, it's my responsibility to make them look good. If I do
Mhm.
something that doesn't roll well, it comes back on them. And because that's the last thing I would ever want to do, I focus in on where their energy is. And from there, you can be aware of everyone else in the room as well. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
So the counter
Absolutely.
to that is that if I go into a creative room where I'm choreographing or I'm directing, if I want people to be honest and authentic artists, they have to feel comfortable with me. And I can't do my job if people don't feel comfortable being open with me. And I think that's a gift. Like for someone to be willing to be vulnerable with you and to show you the most tender and sort of delicate parts of themselves, that's something that I honor every time I've ever been gifted with that experience. So as a result, there's, I think, sort of a built-in empathy and compassion and sort of tenderness in that
Mhm.
conversation, so that if they feel comfortable and I know that they trust me, then I can guide their work into a direction that I think will serve them the best.
I love that. I think what I love the most about you saying that is all of the work that we do in circus and in the stunt world seems so like hardcore in a way and so like
Yeah, totally.
physically demanding that
Mhm.
talking about the emotional aspect of this and the importance of having like a vulnerable space to work in is really it's really cool and enlightening.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the type of work it is. I think that
Mm.
to me would be a big divide between circus work and stunt work in my experience. That circus is more about the person who's doing it, and stunt work is very much in service of a larger project. Like the stunt performer themselves is not the most important person in any given moment. Does that make sense? It's our
Sure,
responsibility,
yeah, totally.
yeah, in that moment to tell the story that the director is trying to tell with the actors, and we're supposed to facilitate that experience. So I worked on The Greatest Showman, and I was stunt doubling Zendaya, who's really great. The whole project was like a magical experience. Like going to work every day was a gift.
Yo, your resume.
I've done a lot of really cool stuff, just sort of like in random places and ways. Yeah. So a cool part about The Greatest Showman is that I was a part of the creation process for Rewrite the Stars. I know it's got its, things associated with it because it's definitely a film and not circus.
Uh-huh.
But it was really interesting to take what I would define as my skill set and my vocabulary and make it fit inside of the greater story of what the director was trying to say.
Mhm.
Like there were multiple moments where the director would say, "Yeah, that looks cool, but why are you doing it?"
Hmm.
And as an actor, of course, my thought is right. Duh. Okay, what's my intention? And from my school of acting, what's my objective? What actions am I going to choose to take as this character? And because I came at it as an actor and an acrobat, I was able to have some really great influence on the way that, or what I'm really proud of, I guess I should say, influence on the way that that product ended up being portrayed. So I think you've got that kind of stunt work where it's a rarity where you, at least in my experience, where you get the gift of really being able to be super creative in the way that I would define as creative, coming from an acrobat's perspective. But I've also done stunt jobs where I walked on set and the director goes, "Great, I need you to body tackle that guy." And there's a crash pad waiting, and it was a commercial for shoes I did years ago. And I met someone and I went into hair and makeup and I literally ran from 10 feet away, flew in the air, body tackled a dude into a mat, and that was my job. And there's nothing creative about that. You know what I mean? It's like, do the thing you need to do.
Totally.
So it's sort of, it depends. And I think that's sort of the gift too, I think, of being diversified in your skill set, because it means that you can take the time to do the things that are creatively satisfying and that feed you as an artist while also sort of keeping your toe in the commercial world, because at the end of the day we all have to eat, and the commercial world is really useful for getting people paid, and to sort of ignore that, I think, is to do yourself a disservice, especially with the kind of skills that a lot of circus performers have. So I've been lucky to sort of straddle that line a little bit and give myself the ability to sort of play on both sides of it.
If a circus performer wants to get into stunt work, how do you recommend they do that? Do you think you have to move to LA or Toronto or Atlanta, or what steps should they take?
I don't really know because my journey was really specific.
Yeah, totally. Get ready to get lucky is what Chris was
saying. I went to work one day where my boss loved me and she's like, hey, look, I know someone who needs someone who looks like you.
Love that.
I think it's a question. Stunt work is not just circus work. The same way that circus performers work on their skills, whether you're a tumbler or a juggler or an aerialist, you spend all of this time and energy getting your reps in so that you can trust your technique when you're working. Stunt work is the same way. So the awareness that you have as an acrobat will be super useful if you need to throw yourself down a flight of stairs, but you need to know how to do that safely. You need to know how to execute a high fall safely. You need to know how to fight and make it look real, or how to hold a firearm and make it look like you know what you're doing with it. Any piece of advice I would give to any circus performer that's interested in getting into the stunt world is to start diversifying your skill set. Mm-hmm. And after that, it's a question of hustling film sets. It's a really old school way to do it, but you take your headshot, your resume, a reel of yourself, and you go to set after set after set, and you talk to stunt coordinators, and you do what you can to get some FaceTime in. There are a bunch of really great databases. I tend to belong to ones that are looking for specific people because I have a very niche look, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But there are a lot of resources to sort of start that conversation for people.
It's so funny. I wanted to interview you about your kind of behind the scenes artistic work at Cirque du Soleil. And it's like this whole other skill set that you have that we're finding out about and learning about, which I always love from my guests when they surprise me like this. Oh, I have one other question. I've been like holding on to this. Did you get to meet Beyonce?
Yeah.
What's she like? She cool?
She is the hardest working person I've ever met in my entire life.
Really?
I was amazed at her dedication. And because she's so hardworking and because she's so brilliant, everybody she surrounds herself with are the best in the world. So whenever you're in a room with her, you are in a room with the best in the world. And if you're in a space like that, you can't help but do everything you can to rise to the occasion. So when I went out for formation, they had the final round of the auditions. I was there. We went to a place in the middle of Pennsylvania. I don't remember what it was called, but they flew me out. Did I bring my fabric? I don't remember. And the morning after I landed, I went to the space. I don't know if I met Marshall right away. I think I met Greg Curtis, who works with the Aerial Studio Pro, who choreographed formation. And I walked into the space. I was sort of like, oh my God, this is crazy. Because it's a venue that fits a whole arena stage inside of it. Wow. It's crazy. It's nuts. And they said, great, go warm up. And I was like, okay, no one else was there. It was just me at first. And I get into a hammock. And as I'm warming up, I hear Beyonce starting to figure out her vocals because they're making creative decisions the whole time. She's a perfectionist and she is amazingly, amazingly talented. And I tell you, one of the best creative experiences I've ever had was just free flowing to her vocalizing. I don't even know what she sung. I don't know. But it was one of those moments where all you can do is just drop in and let the music carry you. And her voice is so amazing.
Wow.
So amazing. And yeah, sorry, like the more I think about it, the more I'm like really excited that I had that experience.
No, damn, I've got like chills right now, like for you. That's so cool. I'm so glad I asked that question because I was like, this seems like a really dumb thing to ask because like it's not about anything about Crista or anything, but like, how's it?
I didn't like hang out with her,
right?
Though.
Of course,
you know what I mean. Like, there was no like. I met her twice. I met her once while I was working on Blow, and I met her once while I was working on Formation. Sure. Like, it wasn't like
totally.
She is the lady boss. Like, she walks into that room and she's like, "This is what I want now," and everyone's like, "Okay."
So cool. Yeah. Gotcha. So from that, you met Marshall, who recommended you for your job at Alegria.
Maybe.
Can you explain exactly what you do on Alegria?
Ooh, it's really hard to describe, mostly because I think it changes so much. There are sort of two sides to my job, or three, I guess. There's an administrative side of it. I sort of organize and coordinate artist integration and that kind of stuff.
Because your formal job title is assistant artistic director?
In French, they call it the artistic assistant, but
Okay.
the easiest translation, or sort of what I've been told is a totally acceptable Americanized version of it, is the assistant artistic director. So our artistic director is Michael Smith. He's amazing. Like, working with him is a gift. He's just like, he's great. And a lot of what I do is assist him in continuing to sort of guide the evolution of the show. So when Cirque opens a show, we think of it like a baby.
Mhm.
And as time passes, the show grows. And since we opened a little over a year, what's today's date? Just shy of a year ago, the show has evolved. The artists have grown into their characters, and we've had multiple acts come in and out. And it's my job to sort of help guide that evolution. Because I come from a dance background, I have a lot of say in terms of the choreographic perspective. But I also want to make it very clear that the artists come to the table with so much. Like, I don't like think of choreography and put it on people. They come to the table with so much creativity that I look at what they do and we pick the best of what they do and put it together. And Michael is a part of the whole process. So it allows us, I think it sort of comes around to my favorite part about any entertainment job, but this one in particular, is that it's a really collaborative job. I think it's my job to see the best in people and to help them bring that to the table, and to help them shine in the brightest light that they can make for themselves. And whatever I can do to facilitate that, not only on an individual level, but on a show level, because there are 54 of them, I think. So the goal is to allow all of them to shine in the same direction so that you get this like megawatt of a show. And I think we're doing a really great job of it. I'm really, really proud of it. It's something that I'm really excited to invite people to come see. And I'm really looking forward to when we're back.
Yeah, we all are. For sure. When you start creation on it, you're talking about kind of like helping art. It almost sounds like you're an editor of sorts, where you're helping people kind of figure out what they've created. Do they want to kind of whittle down into their... And do you do this for individual acts? Do you do this for the whole show? Do you do this for portions? What does that look like?
It depends on who I'm working with and what they need and what they want, quite frankly. I wasn't really a part of the original creation of the show. So I showed up the last month of creation to sort of have a lot of conversations with the creators to get a feeling for what they wanted. But my creative input wasn't really a part of that process. In terms of the way that I sort of work with people, I think editing is a really great way to put it. I've had a couple of moments where I've said, like, this is the choreography. But even the choreography that I have or I've given people to do isn't purely my own. It comes from our choreographer, and we've changed it. And one of the artists like this and another like that. And because of how they choose to move or what feels good on them, they've decided to make it their own by doing this instead. So it is kind of like editing. It's a little like molding. It's sort of allowing yourself to see the show fresh every time you see it. And I feel like that's the hardest part about it, is because I've seen the show so many times, I have to be conscious to notice something new every night.
Because you tour with the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm with it all the time.
Because the director usually, once they're done, they go on to their next project. I mean, I think about like with a Broadway show or, like any theater project.
I get what you're getting at. And it is a really different perspective. Like, typically in Broadway, you're right. The show opens, the director isn't allowed to say anything. The show is set, stage management takes over. It's the same thing every night. Our show is not like that at all. The show is different every night. I think that's something that is a given, because we're doing high level acrobatics, because it's a large toll on the body and we want to give an exponential show every evening. We have to make sure that we take care of the artists as a part of that process. And a lot of that's sort of workload management. And a part of that workload management is managing tracks. So creatively, there can be different people in different tracks of the show.
Yeah. Can you explain what a track is for the people at home?
A track, it's kind of like your script for the show.
This is okay.
And it's something that that offers us flexibility. It offers the artists flexibility to make sure that everyone has a chance to do different things. I think that it's doing the same show 8 times a week 10 shows a week. It's a lot. And I think that changing it a little bit, I think is nice for them. I haven't been an artist in that circumstance in that way, so I can't speak to it from like firsthand experience in the Cirque du Soleil world, but I have worked on shows where I did the same show I can't like hundreds of times, and I had to quit my job
Mm.
because I was no longer safe, because I was in the air not thinking about anything that I was doing. I was fine, like I obviously my body knew what I needed to do, but the fact that I'd done it so many times that I could do it without having to focus on it meant I couldn't do that job anymore. So for me, I feel like part of the benefit is that it allows the artist to try different things. You know, I want to try this tumble pass. I want to work on this skill. I want to do this cue. It offers a chance for them to grow too and to learn different things. We had one of our power trackers just learned her first aerial bit. She does the entrance for crossfield, and she's never done any aerial before. And now she's like, oh, this is really cool. I like it. So having the opportunity to have tracks also allows us to change things on a regular basis while making it very clear to everyone what has to happen. And we have a lineup. It's like a 6-page document that we print out every single show that says where everybody has to go when.
Wow.
So everybody knows where their tracks are and there's no confusion.
That's awesome. When you were creating, or even now, as you're saying, the show is constantly changing, you guys are going in, you're doing little things here and there. For you, how much creative input do you get in that process? Like, do you get to suggest things like, I think it would be really cool if we had a guy in a hat run on stage then, or something?
It just kind of depends. The crosswheel cue, the aerial cue that comes in, I'm always choreographing whoever we have do that. That's something that I have been given sort of free reign creatively. We have nymph characters that I've been lucky enough to be able to sort of help them evolve their character depending on who's doing it. Some things that I do are really like, this is what I want to have happen. Let's try it. But a lot of my work, I want to bring it back around to the fact that I'm really inspired by the people that I work with.
Mm.
As an artist, I always choreographed by doing something. You know, as an aerialist, I would move through the air and find something that felt good or that I thought looked cool, and then work on that, work on that, work on that. And this has been a really beautiful experiment for me in learning how to work outside of my body, because I was never an Olympic gymnast.
Sure.
You know, I am not a contortionist. I am super proud of what I've accomplished in the world that I've done it, but I'm not an artist in a Cirque show, you know, and my physical vocabulary isn't the same as theirs, and it shouldn't be. And what's been so amazing about this is learning different ways to communicate with people about intention, about movement, about what makes sense visually. And sometimes it really is just pure visuals. It's you need to stand there because we need to balance the stage. But sometimes it's, you know, I think it'll be cool if we do this. So can we try that? And I'm super supported by the team in being able to play with those things if and when we have the time. But let's be honest, we don't always have the time because 8 to 10 shows a week.
Yeah. So what's the next step? Do you think you will be an AD? Do you think you'll get to artistic direct the show, or, you know, like, where do you go?
I mean, I would be remiss if I said that was not exactly my plan. I took this job with the intention of learning how to be an AD. I think the journeyman phase of any artist's career is the most freeing and sometimes the most valuable. And I think of this as sort of the journeyman's phase of my career as a choreographer and a director. I am given the opportunity to try things, you know, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've been given the opportunity to expand my skill set because I'm used to working, or before now, I was used to working with 1 or 2 people, you know, not 13 on stage at once, all with different, you know, feelings and different vibes and different levels of experience with dance, you know? So a lot of this has been challenging myself in that way. And to be quite honest, I also have no clue, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago, would I be where I am now? The answer was no. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would not have known that these jobs existed. Like the fact that I remember as a kid, like always having these like pipe dream thoughts, right? Like it would be so cool to work with some famous actors or to be at the Metropolitan Opera House or to work with these pop stars and da 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 da. And to know that I've worked with Harrison Ford and Viola Davis and Zac Efron and Zendaya and Hugh Jackman and Beyonce and at the Metropolitan Opera House. Like if you'd asked me 10 years ago, would this have happened? I couldn't have told you because I had no idea what the world would present to me. I think right now I'm working really hard at being the best assistant artistic director I can be. I'm trying to do what I can to encourage all of the artists in the show to be the best artists that they can be and to support them on their creative journey and to also challenge myself to do things that scare me. And I think the one thing that I have learned is if it makes you a little afraid, that's the right choice. Every time I've ever had something that has turned into something amazing, it scared me. And I turned away from something that scared me once, and I will never do it again.
What was it?
I don't want to tell.
Okay, you don't have to tell me.
Okay.
I just had to ask. I'm nosy.
I was given an opportunity to go into the final rounds of auditions for a show. And the casting director was very, very specifically, I need you to call me. I need you to call me. And I was so intimidated that I didn't call them.
Yeah.
And I should have. Also, like, you're not going to get anything unless you ask for it. You have to show up. You have to go to the audition. You have to go to the dance class. Like if as a performer, you feel like you have things that you're not good at, work on them, because your skill set with them will not grow if you just avoid them. Like I did some musicals, which is weird because me singing, oh, good Lord. I was like, you're going to turn my mic off, right? And then they didn't. And I was like, no. But I've always been afraid of singing. And it's come back to me so many times in my life that if I had taken singing lessons the first time I'd thought of it and had not been afraid of it, my relationship with my voice would be completely different right now. But because I was uncomfortable and it wasn't that I was running from it. It was just, I was a better dancer. I was a better actor. I could get the job doing all of the other things. And being in musicals wasn't really something I actually wanted, but it's a useful skill for a circus performer to have, especially because now musicals are putting a whole bunch of stuff in the air.
Totally.
So if you can act, sing, and dance and do circus, you win.
Crista, this has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much. You are sharing so many amazing insights. I have one last question, which I always ask every guest. You have been dropping all these really great little pieces of advice throughout the interview. So this seems redundant to ask, but I do it every time. So my last question is, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
Whoa, that's big. What are we defining as the beginning of my career? Like when I was a dancer?
The way I always conceive of this whenever I ask it is there a time at the very, whatever the beginning means to you, where you, or some point along the line where you could have gotten in a time machine, gone back to that and told yourself something, and everything would have been better because of that. Maybe not different, but maybe a little better.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to answer that because I feel like there's an implication of regret.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't regret any of the decisions that I've made. And that's not to say that I think I've made all of the right ones all the time. But even that one thing that I told you, that job I didn't go for because I was afraid to go into that room. If I had taken that job, I wouldn't have ended up in Ender's Game, which means I wouldn't have ended up working for Beyonce, which means I wouldn't have ended up working at Alegria. So I feel like if there's any advice I can give to myself, it's to listen to myself. And if you're brave enough to swing over people 40 feet in the air, you are brave enough to go through that door. And don't forget it. When in doubt, remember, you are brave and you are kind and you are generous and you deserve all of the success that you are going to get.
Work.
Yeah.
I love that. Krista, thank you so much. That is more than enough. You are more than enough. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
That was my interview with Crista Marie Jackson. How lovely is she, guys? The most lovely, am I right? Early on in this interview, Crista and I talked about how she went to her first audition. And I want to point out something that I don't know how prevalent this is with a lot of circus artists. In the acting world, it's very, very common that you go on auditions, not necessarily to get the part, but just because you want to practice auditioning. Now, that obviously means that you're in some way right for the part. You're not just going to show up and try to play Blanche Dubois if you are a 7 foot tall man, unless casting indicates that's what they want. But you do want to know that you're appropriate for the role. But I think that a lot of artists get very nervous about auditioning, and actually there is a skill set for it, and it's as important to learn how to audition as it is to learn your technical skills, your stage presence, all of that. So Crista pointing that out I thought was really cool. But what she said about getting ready to get lucky, I think is a really optimistic way of looking at honing your skills, because you never know what you're going to be asked to do. You never know what special skills you might have that other people don't have that give you an extra edge for the job you want. And I think during this time, I can't help but to bring it back to the fact we're all under this weird quarantine, especially because circus is so affected by it. But leaning into other skill sets. Crista talks about learning how to point a gun, but I know stunt people who specialize in driving cars, specialize in archery, and even within the circus community, learning to play an instrument, singing, all of these kinds of odd manipulations you can do are definitely ways to enhance your skill set if you're not able to, if you're an aerialist, get in the air, or if you do teeterboard, punch a teeterboard. So, getting ready to get lucky can look like a lot of different things. And once you are lucky, the way you stay lucky is to be really easy to work with. I think I always go back to Joel Baker's 3 rules for being successful in circus: save your money, don't be lazy, always be working on a new idea. I think rule number 4 is don't be a dick. But if we're thinking about it in terms of someone so lovely and so not a dick, like Crista Marie Jackson, it's more about anticipating needs or reading the room or understanding what's needed of you so that no one else has to tell you. And she makes this point when she's talking about going on a movie set and looking for the stunt coordinator, because her job in that moment is to make him or her look good. Or when she's with Alegria, her job is to support the artistic director's vision of the show. Her job is to support the artists and the cast in their ideas and what they have to bring to the table. And if you can look at any job you have as a means to support the greater good, I think you're in a really, really good place to leverage your luck and meet amazing people and get to where you dream of going. The last thing that I heard from Crista's interview that I want to bring up, there's obviously so much, but it's just a little uncanny because I'm thinking a lot about this right now, this idea of creative U-turns. Crista was super vulnerable when she talked about this fear that she had of going into a room for an audition and answering the call that the casting agent was giving her. And she said she missed out on this opportunity. And I'm reading the book The Artist's Way again by Julia Cameron. And Julia Cameron has something really interesting to say about this time period, this time when people do this. They bulk or they do a creative U-turn. And she says, a successful creative career is always built on successful creative failures. The trick is to survive them. It helps to remember that even our most illustrious artists have taken creative U-turns in their time. And I think it's important to remember that anything that you see as a failure, anything that you were about to do but then got scared to do, is just another part of your journey as an artist and maybe a circus artist. And there's more if you just keep going. In the interview, Crista talks about how if she had gone through that door, she may not have ever met her friend who got her the job on Ender's Game, and she wouldn't have performed with Beyonce, wouldn't have been with Alegria. And so everything leads to the next thing in the right time. So trust yourself, trust your path, even though I know it's a bit weird for all of us right now. And I promise I'll try to do the same. And we'll all think of Crista the whole time. In addition to having a very extensive IMDb page, Crista is also on Instagram at Crista_Marie. And she has a cute little website. It's CristaMarieJackson.wixsite.com. And as for me, as always, for aerial training tips and inspiration, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at _artist_athlete. My website is theartistathlete.com. I'm on Facebook, The Artist Athlete. And if you want to support the podcast, keep us going, keep the lights on, keep the editor's children fed. That's really dramatic. I don't think that I'm actually responsible for that much of his budget, but put some spending money in his pocket. You can go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to become a Patreon. I hope you're staying happy. I hope you're staying healthy. And I almost just said I hope you're staying circus, but that feels really excessive. So I'm just going to shut off the mic because it is 1:30 a.m. and it's my bedtime. Talk at you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.